What if you could find hundreds of dollars hiding inside your monthly bills without earning a single dollar more? Most people assume cutting expenses means painful sacrifices, but history and behavioral science tell a very different story. In this video, we're breaking down 5 straightforward, well-documented tricks that have helped millions of people shrink their monthly outgoings. And we're going to explain exactly why each one works. Let's start with one of the most well-documented money leaks in modern personal finance: forgotten subscriptions. A 2022 study by the financial platform Rocket Money found that the average American spends over $200 per month on subscription services, and consistently underestimates that number by about half when asked to guess. That gap between perception and reality is the core of the problem. Here's why this happens psychologically. Subscriptions were deliberately designed around what behavioral economists call the pain of paying. When you swipe a card for a one-time purchase, you feel that transaction. But a $12.99 charge that quietly disappears from your account every month, your brain barely registers it. Marketers have understood this since the moment recurring billing became technically possible. The trick, then, is a simple monthly or quarterly ritual that personal finance educators have been recommending for decades: a full subscription audit. This means going line by line through your bank and credit card statements, not from memory, and identifying every recurring charge. For each one, you ask a single question: have I actively used this in the last 30 days? If the answer is no, it becomes a candidate for cancellation. Historically, people who perform this audit consistently report finding at least 2 or 3 services they had either forgotten about entirely or were duplicating. Think paying for both a streaming service and a cable add-on that covers the same content. The mechanism is simple. The results for many households are immediate. The second trick is rooted in decades of behavioral economics research, and it costs absolutely nothing to implement. It's called the 24-hour rule, and the concept is straightforward. Before completing any non-essential purchase above a threshold you set for yourself, say $30 or $50, you deliberately wait 24 hours before buying. Why does this work? It comes down to a well-studied psychological phenomenon called present bias. Humans are wired to overvalue things in the present moment and undervalue them in the future. When you see something you want right now, your brain's reward system fires with urgency. That urgency is the engine of impulse spending. But research consistently shows that this emotional spike fades rapidly, often within hours. After a 24-hour delay, a large percentage of must-have purchases simply lose their appeal. This principle isn't new. Benjamin Franklin wrote about the virtue of deliberation in financial decisions in the 18th century, and early 20th century personal finance writers consistently emphasized cooling off periods as a core discipline. The modern version, adapted for one-click online shopping and algorithm-driven advertising, is just a digital age application of the same idea. The practical impact on monthly expenses can be significant. Impulse purchases, by multiple researchers' estimates, account for anywhere from 20 to 40% of total consumer spending. Even reducing that fraction by half through a systematic delay rule can represent a meaningful monthly reduction for households where discretionary spending is a regular habit. Here's something the cable, insurance, and internet industries have understood for a long time, even if most consumers haven't. Loyal, long-term customers are routinely charged more than new customers for the exact same service. This practice, sometimes called loyalty penalization or the loyalty tax, is well documented across industries including home insurance, internet providers, cell phone carriers, and subscription software. The reason is purely structural. Companies use promotional rates to attract new customers, and once those customers are onboarded and settled, rates quietly creep upward. The company's assumption, statistically validated over millions of accounts, is that most people will not notice, and of those who do, most will not call. This is where the bill negotiation call comes in. The mechanics are straightforward and have been widely discussed in personal finance education for years. You call your service provider, identify yourself as a long-term customer, ask what current promotional rates are available, and mention, honestly, that you've been comparing competitor pricing. Consumer advocates and personal finance educators consistently report that this single call, when made to the right providers, can reduce monthly bills by 10 to 30%. The historical backdrop here is interesting. Before the proliferation of 12-month introductory pricing in the 1990s and 2000s, utility and service rates were far more static. The shift to promotional pricing models effectively transferred power to assertive consumers, those willing to make the call. Understanding this mechanic means you can take advantage of the same system that was designed to charge you more. Food is one of the largest and most variable categories in most household budgets, which makes it one of the highest leverage areas for monthly expense reduction. But the challenge with groceries isn't that people don't know food costs money. It's that spending in this category tends to be fragmented, frequent, and poorly tracked. A household might shop 3 or 4 times a week across different stores, pick up coffee here, a convenience item there, and by the end of the month have spent significantly more than they estimated, without being able to identify where it went. The grocery receipt habit is a well-established corrective mechanism. The core practice: collect every food-related receipt, grocery stores, convenience stores, takeout, coffee shops, for a full 30-day period, then total them by category. This single act of measurement, without any other change in behavior, tends to produce what researchers call a spotlight effect. When spending is made visible, people naturally moderate it. Beyond awareness, there's a specific pattern that personal finance educators frequently highlight in this category: the cost differential between meal planning and unplanned shopping. A 2018 study published in the Journal of Nutrition Education and Behavior found that households who engaged in meal planning spent significantly less on food and reported lower rates of food waste. The connection is logical. When you know what you're buying and what you're making, you buy less spontaneously and waste less of what you purchase. The grocery receipt habit doesn't tell you what to eat or how to shop. What it does is build a factual baseline, and that baseline historically is the foundation on which meaningful expense reduction is built. The fifth trick is less about a single action and more about a mental framework, one that many people who successfully reduce their monthly expenses describe as genuinely clarifying. It's the practice of mapping your monthly expenses into 2 columns: fixed and variable. Fixed expenses are those that stay the same every month regardless of your behavior: rent or mortgage, loan repayments, insurance premiums, and any subscription you've committed to for a defined term. Variable expenses are those that fluctuate based on your choices: groceries, dining, entertainment, clothing, transportation costs beyond a fixed car payment. This distinction matters enormously for practical expense reduction. Fixed expenses are difficult to change quickly. They typically require renegotiation, a lifestyle change, or the end of a contract. Variable expenses, by contrast, respond directly and immediately to behavioral shifts. When someone says they can't find anywhere to cut, it's often because they're looking at their fixed costs, which genuinely may offer limited short-term flexibility, and not at the variable column, which almost always does. Personal finance educators have used this framework, sometimes called a spending map or budget snapshot, for generations, precisely because it moves the conversation from vague frustration to specific opportunity. When you can see that your fixed costs represent 60% of your income and your variable costs represent 30%, you immediately know where your controllable margin lives. The historical significance here is straightforward. Households that understand this distinction don't waste energy feeling stressed about costs they cannot change quickly. They direct that energy toward the costs they can. That's not a hack. It's simply accurate information applied intelligently. So there you have it. 5 well-documented, historically grounded tricks for reducing monthly expenses: the subscription audit, the 24-hour rule, the bill negotiation call, the grocery receipt habit, and the fixed versus variable expense map. None of these require a finance degree, a specific income level, or a dramatic lifestyle overhaul. What they do require is attention. A willingness to look at where money is actually going rather than where we assume it's going. The common thread running through all five is the same principle that personal finance educators have emphasized for well over a century. Visibility precedes change. You cannot manage what you cannot measure, and the moment you start measuring, behavior tends to shift naturally. It's also worth noting what this video hasn't done. It hasn't told you exactly what to cut, what to keep, or how to spend your money. Those decisions are deeply personal and depend on circumstances that are unique to every household. What we've tried to do here is explain the mechanics, the psychology, the history, and the reasoning behind each of these approaches, so that you can evaluate them with full information. If you found this breakdown useful, consider giving this video a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are trying to understand their finances more clearly. And if you want more content like this, covering the mechanics behind budgeting, debt, investing, and financial history, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. We'll see you there.